Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, June 7th. Was it September 7th that George H.W. Bush once mistook for Pearl Harbor Day, I think? Well, at any rate, that date, whichever one it was that he cited, will live in infamy. As soon as somebody resurrects it and reminds me what the date was. Anyway, good morning. It's Tuesday. Boy, this is a long week. It does feel extra long today. I ran out yesterday to try and do some, I guess this would be unusual work for presidenting when you're the president of your congregation, but our fence needed repair. So I was out there trying to put our fence back up. I'll be out there again today afterwards. I'm tired. I'm a little bit sore. And, just an old guy trying to put up a fence sort of thing. And I think I need to dash out after the show today to try and get this fence post secured in place before it starts raining at like 2 o'clock. So, oh boy, what a day. Okay, well, there's many other things happening in this area, and people are paying attention to it. It is Tuesday of January 6th hearing week. I'm starting to get nervous and watching fellow cynics. I try not to be too bad about this, but now watching fellow cynics saying, it's another one of those things where they're going to put on a big show and it's not going to matter. It's very tempting to go this way. But on the other hand, pardon me, boy, I certainly don't want to do anything to encourage that. But it is hard to feel like I'm trying to think of what's going to get the country, whatever that is, interested. I'm going to be interested. You're going to be interested. Hundreds of thousands of people out of the many, many hundreds of millions that we have are going to be interested. And, of course, Fox News is going to be downplaying it, and all those other weird, not quite television stations that exist out there are going to do everything they can to downplay it. They just don't have that kind of market share. And, I don't know, a primetime thing. I feel like that's a possibility, that they're really going to wake some people up to the seriousness of it and get some more widespread attention because it's going to be on. But it's also, television has never been more fragmented in this country. People can turn on streaming on-demand services and turn to a million different options for entertainment. I don't know if I could, you're not supposed to think of this as entertainment, obviously, but whatever it is, distraction, instruction, for that matter. They could turn on the History Channel and watch another documentary about Hitler. Yay. Something like that. But, yeah, it worries me a great deal that the pattern has always been presenting these damning facts and having people say, yeah, but Johnny Depp or who's on Survivor or whatever. It's difficult to ever, I think, feel like you're really going to bring people along in a situation like this. All right, well, okay, I don't want to say that it can't be done, but I don't feel like it can't be done. But you got to try, and prime time is as good a gambit as any, I think, in all of this. All right, let's see. Much happening today. Many things that I've put away in pocket. Maybe we'll go do that. We'll do a early in the week pocket emptying exercise, and it being Tuesday, as I said this morning, E-Day, yesterday being D-Day. It's not just that it goes in progression from D to E. It is E stands for Eastern Orthodox D-Day. And but if it did go in order, of course, that would make Wednesday, very frequently referred to as Hump Day, I guess. It's a camel joke, as you all know. Would also become F Day, and so that would maybe swing the pendulum back in the other direction for a not-so-subtle joke. Anyway, that's not what it's all about. What it's all about here in America is, I don't know what. There's some great articles here, I think maybe as set up for the January 6th committee. This week has been, it's Tuesday, and this week has been a deluge. I would include the weekend, though. We'll say the 7-day rolling average for articles about very serious sounding and frightening aspects of the coup attempt that are being uncovered. They're doing a great job paving the way for Thursday's hearing and letting little tidbits out to the news day by day. So we'll see if we can't uncover a couple of those and help do the work of laying the groundwork. I wanted to check back in quickly with the coronavirus tracker, though, before I go and do that, from the New York Times. The news has been relatively good in Loudoun County, Virginia. Things seem to have stabilized, and it's looking like the trends are working that way in a lot of localities and in some of the larger political subdivisions, countries, nations, large islands, whatever. But it's stabilized at about 170 or so cases per day over the past, is it 7 or 14 days? 7 days that they use in the coronavirus tracker. So that's good. It peaked over 200 and started heading toward 300, but then turned back around and went back down. And I'm noticing similarly in the numbers, the international scene, the country counts that I glean from, where do I go again? Worldometers each night. Among the top 10 countries with the most reported positive results, it's hard to phrase it exactly right these days. It's we're well past the stage where each case is presumed to be another person. There are many people now catching COVID 2, 3, 4 times. So it's difficult to know. But among the countries that have reported the most infections, and this too, has as part of the mystery how many are reporting, how honest are the countries about what they're hearing, et cetera, et cetera. But among the consistent top 10, the top 10 has remained fairly consistent for a while with some fluctuation down at the number 10 spot. But what I'm noticing is that the numbers have stopped rising for some time now. Even there were these countries and territories. Right at the top of the list at the moment is the Pharaoh Islands, which is terrible because I would really like to go to the Pharaoh Islands, and I don't want to go there and get COVID. But I don't know how they're doing there. Also terrible because it's not a country, it's a territory of Denmark, and so it's difficult whenever you say, well, the top 10 countries. Well, your number one country isn't a country, so how good could your data be? At any rate, they sit at the top of the list, and they have been there for a little while, but the numbers used to be explosive in their growth. That's how you get there. But you would expect a slowdown, but it's more than just a slowdown. It's actually a walk back. I think now at this point, some of these countries are reporting their numbers perhaps once or twice a week. And then on the days off where they either don't report anything or I guess maybe make minimal reports, you see the numbers freeze for a couple days in a row. But more than that, we actually are seeing the numbers retreat during the week in between reports, which I haven't actually seen the explanation, but I think it's just mathematical. It's not that people are uninfecting themselves. That's not happening. Nobody's putting light bulbs where their lights don't shine or drinking bleach or anything like that. I think it's just a mathematical fluke that whether it's fluctuations in the population, I'm sure a few cases that were either misreported here and there or whatever can get erased from the books, but I think it's just a statistical anomaly. Fluctuations in population, people that die, whatever. In these very small countries with very low population, if the number you're dividing by to get your rate of infection per capita, if the number of capitas change in a small territory, you can tell. So anyway, the point is, it's been very slow growth lately, and I guess you could call it the end of whatever. You could hope, anyway, that it's the end of whatever wave we happen to be in. Whether there's another one coming, no one really knows, obviously. All right, let's see. Sip of tea, and then back to the U.S. domestic situation, if you would be so kind. All right. What a morning. It's a little warm here, actually. I'll say to the non-existent production staff, turn down the thermostat. All right. Here's what's up in setting the stage for the January 6th hearings. Tops on the list, because it was last into pocket, CNN's report that emails reveal that the Trump campaign told fake electors in Georgia, this is the headline, fake electors in Georgia, to use, quote, complete secrecy. That sounds pretty good. Let's see. Caitlin Polans, Zachary Cohen, Evan Perez teamed up for the byline here with a very ugly picture of Donald Trump illustrating the piece. Good for your morning digestion. The Trump campaign directed a group of Georgia Republicans to meet in secret and obscure their objectives in an email obtained by the federal prosecutors as part of their recent investigation into Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the election in several swing states. I'm liking the language that they use here. The email is part of the intensifying Justice Department investigation focused on the Trump campaign's interactions with so-called alternate Republican electors in states that Trump lost and whether a scheme to organize them could be charged as a crime. I hope so. The Georgia email has not been disclosed publicly until now. It was sent by, here's a good matrix glitch for you. The guy's name is Robert Sinners. Plural Sinners, but still, it's pretty amazing you would be running around with that name. That's Trump's Election Day operations lead in Georgia. Sent on December 13th, 2020, 18 hours before the group of alternate electors gathered at the Georgia state capitol, according to multiple sources familiar with it. You would think that they could charge some of these guys with a crime, given that they forged a fairly important official document, or at least purported to be electors and forged, they faked their identities. This is... Well, anyway, I don't think I have to convince anybody here, but if you're looking for a crime on this one, I think it's fairly obvious. Anyway, so what does Robert Sinners instruct them to do? Fantastic thing to have in your pocket as the prosecutor, really. The email reads, I must ask for your complete discretion in this process. Your duties are imperative to ensure the end result, a win in Georgia for President Trump, but will be hampered unless we have complete secrecy and discretion. I'm not liking the guy's vocabulary and his use of the words all that much. Your duties are imperative. Now, that's just wrong. Your duties are imperative to ensure the end result. Your discretion is imperative to ensure the end result. Your duties are important, and it's imperative that you keep them a secret. And then to go on, the end result, a win in Georgia for President Trump, will be hampered unless we have complete secret. I mean, they'll be defeated. They'll be upended. Your duties will become moot. You'll jeopardize the mission. Hampered. That might actually be the case, but I don't know. It doesn't really convey the right sense of urgency from my view, but good. They screwed it up, and now they'll all be arrested. It's fantastic. The Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney's Office, which has seated its own grand jury to investigate Trump's attempts to overturn the election results in Georgia, and the U.S. House Select Committee on January 6th have also obtained copies of the email, according to sources familiar with it. And I'm pretty sure this is part of the effort to gin up interest in Thursday's hearing. The email underscores the Trump campaign's role in creating false election documents, that's a problem, as a way to supplant Joe Biden's win in Georgia. Supplant. This is the CNN writers on this one. Anyway, okay. Acceptable use. It's a wide vocabulary, wider than usual. CNN previously reported that Trump campaign officials oversaw efforts to put forward illegitimate electors in 7 swing states Trump lost. In the email, Sinners also told Trump's electors this is interesting, to misdirect security guards when they arrived at the State House and to tell the guards that they were attending a meeting with two state senators, Brandon Beach and Burt Jones. So let's have those two in for some questioning, please. Please, they say, at no point should you mention anything to do with presidential electors or speak to media, Sinners wrote. The Washington Post also reported this email on Monday. You may have read about it there. One source familiar with the campaign said the secrecy was needed because of restricted access at the State House during the coronavirus pandemic. It's a good excuse. And post-election political tumult. The need to meet at the State House was paramount to make the fake electors' slate potentially viable under the law if Biden's win were to be blocked, the source said. So again, here you have the conspirators saying, we want to send you as an alternate slate of electors. Now, and there's two ways of looking at this, right? They're hoping that any federal judges, juries, etc., the general public, to the extent that they care, can be convinced to see these documents as an attempt, nothing more than an attempt to make sure that the state was counted in the Electoral College, one way or the other, their belief being that the Congress or the Georgia State Legislature or someone somewhere would eventually invalidate the electoral votes cast for Joe Biden for reasons, whatever they may be, and that an alternate slate of electors voting for the only other person in the race that was viable, Donald Trump, would then stand to take their place so that Georgia wouldn't be excluded from the Electoral College. That's the excuse, the one that they're hoping judges, juries, prosecutors, and the public will go with, because then you can say, well, all we were trying to do was make sure that we were counted. Hey, if the judicial system and the political system determine that Joe Biden's electoral votes are valid, then they're valid, and you don't need our piece of paper. It's just a backup. And as we mentioned, I think last time we spoke about it, Greg mentioned, yeah, there's a big difference between the people who submitted paperwork to say, this is submitted in case the other one is going to get thrown out. We're going to do everything we can to get the other one thrown out. But in case it does, take this. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. Just throw this piece of paper away. Then there's the other ones that purport to be the actual electors from that state. And I don't know whether Georgia hedged its bets or not. But now I think probably after the fact, they're trying very hard to make it look like they were just offering themselves as an alternative. The problem is, if you're just offering yourself as an alternative, what need is there for secrecy? There's still the need to meet in the State House. I understand that. I don't know what the Constitution requires for where they vote versus the Electoral Count Act and what that requires. But I think it says in the Constitution that you're to meet at the seat of the state's legislature and cast your votes there. So they figured, all right, well, we'll do it in the State House, so they won't have that to hold against us. If we did it at the Wendy's, first of all, people would say, sir, this is a Wendy's. You can't cast your electoral votes here. And but then they would be able to point to it and say, all it says is that it needs to be done at the State House, and we have done that. The problem is the floor of whichever legislative chamber they're using at the State House for the official work was obviously busy. And I think it would have looked awkward and unusual and suspicious had both sets of electors showed up in the same room. Although, again, if you're just saying, look, all we're doing is backing ourselves up and making sure that Georgia is represented, there's really no need to do it secretly, or no need to not let the actual electors know what you're up to, because they'll probably have pretty good faith in their own work, and they won't be worried about it, and they'll leave it in the hands of the judges because, I don't know, people still trust them to do the right thing. Although I don't know why. But they do. All right. Pressing on then. Right. One source said that the secrecy, that's a good excuse, was needed not because they were trying to hide what they were doing, but because at the time the Capitol was mostly locked down, and they weren't letting people in because of COVID. And then that they needed to lie about having a meeting with 2 state senators so that they would be let in and they could surreptitiously sneak into whatever room they had set aside for these fake electors to do their quote-unquote voting in. All right, so where were we? The Trump campaign and the Georgia GOP didn't respond to requests for comment this week. Let's see. Ellie Honig, a CNN legal analyst, or leaguer analyst, whichever you like, and former federal prosecutor, noted that the email could become part of a conspiracy investigation because it could show the scheme went beyond idle chatter and instead involved the campaign giving electors specific direction. He noted the significance of asking electors to conceal their actions. A prosecutor would argue to a jury, why the secrecy? What were they hiding? Honig said. Next section here, the federal probe growing in seriousness. In recent weeks, the federal criminal investigation into electors in Georgia and at least one other state has grown in seriousness. A federal grand jury subpoenaed documents, and the FBI interviewed witnesses about the Trump electors and the campaigns last month, seeking details about the signing and mailing of official election documents and the planning that brought together these slates. Subpoenas have asked witnesses for communications with Trump electors as well as with top Trump campaign officials. These subpoenas represent a flurry of investigative activity in recent weeks by the Justice Department to move the sprawling investigation, the largest in Justice Department history, beyond the rioters who sacked the Capitol on January 6th and to scrutinize the role of people who worked in political organizing around Trump. The escalating probe comes as the Justice Department officials eye the calendar with the midterm elections less than 6 months away. Top justice officials are mindful that later this summer, overt investigative activity, such as issuing subpoenas, may be put on hold, people briefed on the internal discussions say. Department guidelines traditionally call for prosecutors to generally avoid interfering with an imminent election. Now, just a reminder that there is a directive from a attorney general, former attorney general now, but he was attorney general, and issued a directive saying, not so much. At least when I, a Republican, am Attorney General, the Republican-run Department of Justice is perfectly free to continue doing these investigations right up through Election Day. It's A-OK, especially as we'll be investigating Democrats. Now, you hope for the more neutral policy, although quite honestly, it's been exploited so many times and in so many ways that I'm quite over the policy. And it doesn't appear to do very much. And the press continues to talk about the investigations regardless. So I don't know. But if the Republicans cleared the way for this investigation to go straight through the midterm elections, if they laid the roadmap out, use it. You can change your mind again later. Yeah, this really did interfere with the elections. We're going to change the policy. But it reminds me very much of the blue slip thing. Republicans bulldoze past blue slips on the Judiciary Committee when they control, and of course Democrats complain. But then Democrats, damn them, are true to their word. And then when they regain control of the Judiciary Committee, they say, we're reinstating blue slips because we are ideologically consistent and don't want to be accused of hypocrisy. Although you might remember that the Republican playbook says they will call you hypocrites. Don't worry about it. Just keep doing what you're doing and keep working. This will waste their time, and in the end, when you're right, you'll win, and everyone else will look like a loser. So, I don't know. Maybe we should use this policy. All right, well, at any rate, the meeting wasn't ultimately secret, as it turns out. It is unclear if the individuals who received Sinner's directions even read the message or followed its calls for secrecy. One person familiar with it told CNN that really won't matter in terms of the conspiracy charge. The fact that the instruction was issued is quite enough. The email was sent a few hours after Trump campaign and GOP state operatives discussed how some state legislatures would be difficult for GOP electors to access. In Wisconsin, another state where Trump put forward fake electors after his loss, the electors also met in secret. CNN previously reported. One Trump elector in Wisconsin said the secrecy was for security reasons, though the Wisconsin Republican Party disputed that those electors met secretly. Sinners told CNN this week that in late 2020 he was working at the direction of the Trump campaign attorneys, that's a problem, and the Georgia GOP chairman, David Schaffer, S-H-A-F-E-R, who knows, who was an elector, by the way. I was advised by attorneys that this was necessary in order to preserve the pending legal challenge's longevity, Sinners said. Following the former president's refusal to accept the results of the election and allow a peaceful transition of power, my views on this matter have changed significantly from where they were on December 13th, Sinners added, looking to get out of a charge now, I think. He now works in the office of Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who resisted pressure from Trump after the election. And it's not clear whether he genuinely has had a change of heart because he's been working around Brad Raffensperger, who I don't think was all that genuine in his convictions either, or whether this is just an attorney recognizing, oh, I could be in trouble here. I no longer think that this is a valid exercise, and we were just doing it to preserve the president's claims in court. And if the court were to settle things, in the opposite direction, we were perfectly willing to accept that. That's the position you want to take to get yourself in the least amount of trouble. And guess what? He's taking it. All right, where were we with this just before we take our break? Yes. Schaefer's attorney told CNN that his client did not try to keep things secret, even though they had been instructed to keep things secret. Well, obviously, they're now learning that the secrecy could hurt them in court and in the court of public opinion, and running around insisting that they weren't keeping it a secret, even though the written messages say, please, please, please do. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on. I really do want to get through this CNN article, although it looks awfully long. Well, we'll see. Maybe the whole thing is comments at the end. Where were we? Yes, right. They were just trying to keep the president's legal challenges afloat. That's the claim now from this attorney, or Sinners, rather, who now works for Brad Raffensperger, of all people. That's kind of interesting. All right, where were we? None of these communications nor his testimony suggest that Mr. Schaffer requested or wished for confidentiality surrounding the provisional electors, attorney Robert Driscoll said. Quite to the contrary, Chairman Schaffer invited TV crews and TV news cameras into the proceedings, and both issued a statement and gave a televised news interview immediately afterward. All right, well, if that's on the record, that's certainly something. I wonder what Sinners thought of it at the time, having begged everybody for secrecy. I mean, Well, that should be interesting to see if they can shake that out. Beach and Jones, the two state senators who they were supposed to say they were having meetings with. Well, it turns out these two, whom the electors were to say they were meeting, also didn't respond to requests for comment, so they don't have their stories quite right yet. Neither state official was set to be an alternate elector, but Jones stepped in as one when one of the Trump electors on the day of the meeting dropped out, according to documentation of the Trump electors released by the federal government. The electors' meeting ultimately didn't occur under such a shroud of secrecy. At least one local news outlet captured video of the electors voting for Trump. Georgia Republican Party Chairman David Schaefer, who was already introduced in the article, and the editors should have reduced it to just Schaefer, was also interviewed on camera at the time, which we also already have learned. They should have just cut this whole paragraph. Interviewed on camera at the time, explaining that the group wanted to provide an alternate slate in case Trump was successful in any of his court challenges. He was not. That's the end of the article. I guess all the rest of the stuff is ads and comments. Good. Okay. Just as well. Time to move on from this one. But it is interesting that they now have something to show to a jury, if it comes to that, that they can use to argue that, no, we weren't trying to keep it secret. We had television crews in there. Although, what it doesn't really show, I mean, given that it wasn't a live uplink shot, they weren't doing a live feed from inside the room, I don't think. I mean, I guess I could look that up and try and find out. But if they were taping it for later, I guess if you're trying to save this argument, you say, well, it needed to be kept secret until the point where the voting was done. They needed to gain access to the state capitol, which would never have been granted to them but for the subterfuge. But once the voting was done, they were free to make it public and to discuss it and try to help bolster Trump's cause during his various court cases and in the court of public opinion. And I mean, you can't keep it secret forever. If you're going to send a certificate to Washington, all right. I mean, I guess there's an argument still to be made here that there's two times at which you could opt to keep your operation secret: before the votes are cast and after the votes are cast. Now, if you keep the operation secret after the votes are cast, then you can't accomplish your objective. If you don't send them to Washington, D.C. and put them on the official record, then you can't do it. Whether your intention was to pose merely as an alternate slate should Trump prevail in court, or whether it was to try to fool somebody outright into thinking that you were the only slate, or whether you were just trying to create confusion by pretending that you were a second ostensibly legitimate slate that would create a real question for the Congress to settle. Whatever it is, obviously it wasn't going to be kept secret afterwards. So I think basically you could say, if you're parsing the evidence, you can throw out anything that was aimed at publicizing the event after the vote takes place, the vote of the fake electors takes place, because obviously there was no interest among these conspirators in keeping it literally secret at that point. So whatever you offer me as evidence that comes to light and was designed to come to light after the fact is of no use, and you could instruct the jury to ignore it. I mean, I don't know whether you could actually get a jury instruction with it, but yeah, they'll be saying, how could you say it was being kept secret when we had a news crew there? But if the news crew wasn't there breaking the news ahead of time or live and saying, we're here in the Georgia state capitol, where in half an hour these alternative electors for Donald Trump, who say they're going to cast their votes for Donald Trump in the Electoral College for XYZ reason, whatever the reason at that point would be, and we'll be back here at noon to show you their voting live, and we'll show it to you in split screen because the real electors are in the other room over there at the same time casting their vote. I don't know whether they did it at noon like you're supposed to do, or whether they threw the time requirement out or whatever, but at any rate, I'm not certain that the TV news footage, the fact that somebody came and taped a bunch of stuff, got back in the van, drove back to the station, and edited the stuff, and then the 6 o'clock evening news, 6 hours after the die is cast, broadcasts the fact that they've done it. That doesn't really speak to the secrecy part. The secrecy part that's of interest is the secrecy beforehand. And news cameras do very little to dispel that. So, okay, that's my on-the-spot analysis of this story. Let's move on to a couple other things that I wanted to share with you. Let's see. First, something that just popped out at me as I was reviewing things during the break. The Hill tweeting an opinion piece with the line, "The West cannot allow, quote, Ukraine fatigue, unquote, to overcome us." And we shouldn't. But the reason I picked that one up, I don't even know whether I'm going to bother reading the article. I mean, I'll agree, we cannot allow Ukraine fatigue to overcome us for various reasons. What struck me was the use of the term Ukraine fatigue, because that was the term that was repeated during the conversation among Republican House leaders that was taped in, I still can never get it clear in my head, May, June 2016, when all the leaders are there, and of course the infamous line from Kevin McCarthy, who blurts out, "I think Putin pays Trump," and Dana Rohrabacher, but we forget all about that guy. But in that conversation, the beginning of that conversation is everybody talking about how they've just met with or had recently visited Ukraine and what trouble they were in. And one of the participants says that the Prime Minister of Ukraine had come and argued to him that people say they have Ukraine fatigue, but we all should really view it as Russia fatigue, because it's Russia that's doing all of this, certainly not Ukraine bringing it on itself. And of course, they have plans to do it everywhere, all over the world, wherever there are democracies to be subverted. And you'll need it. You'll need to, if you're going to be fatigued about it, be fatigued about Russia fatigue, since it's not limited to Ukraine where they're pulling these tricks. I thought that was interesting to see that phrase resurrected. Anyway, I will jump away from that, but I'll show you the article and tweet if you like, and you can read into it, and it might be worth having in the background. Other things that I have put aside to share. Let's see. Oh, yes. Right. We were talking the other day a little bit about this, but I'll remind everybody, a big story from over the weekend, that Ohio Republicans in the state house there have passed a bill. What screen cap am I looking at here? Noah Kim's piece for, I don't know, who is this? Is it HuffPost? Is it, I don't know where he writes. I don't know. And I must have grabbed the screen cap from somebody else who was tweeting it around. It was very widely circulated. Ohio Republicans passed bill allowing teachers to carry guns with just 24 hours of training. And then, of course, making the point in the subheader, we aren't trusted with the books we choose, but somehow we're supposed to be trusted with a gun in school. Yes, that's the inherent contradiction. But remember what the playbook says. No one's going to be worried about that. I was initially interested in the headline because it says that teachers could carry guns with just 24 hours of training. And it's not clear when you're dealing with state Republicans whether they are going to mean something at least a little more sensible, like 24 total hours of training where you take 6 4-hour training sessions or something like that before you get your license to carry inside a school. Or do they mean 24 hours like you sign a request for the permit and 24 hours later, train as much as you want in the next 24 hours, but within 24 hours you're going to get that permit? That is actually possible in some states, but it's not the case in Ohio. They are, in fact, requiring 24 logged hours of training. Well, I say requiring. That's actually kind of part of the thread is they probably won't really require it. Now, what was interesting was, okay, 24 hours of training. It's not nothing, but it's not great. It's not enough. You want to know how many hours they used to require for this? I found the article over the weekend. I should look for this actual article and see, but just so you can get the gist of it. But I think they used to require 700 something. I think it's 737 hours of training before they would let you carry inside of school, which is a lot more. And it makes a lot more sense in that respect. Let me grab this. Ohio Republicans pass bill allowing teachers. Let me Google it up. Tap, tap, tap. Ready? Republicans pass bill allowing teachers. And we'll just search and see if that... There we go. Okay, 4 days ago. Mother Jones. I should have guessed from the orange type that they used for Noah Kim's byline here. Ohio Republicans passed bill allowing teachers to carry guns with just 24 hours of training. I skimmed through this the other day to see if they mentioned it, and yes, they do. It's been barely a week since the gunman in Uvalde, Texas, massacred 19 children and 2 teachers, but Ohio Republicans have already, they have taken action. Federal government, not so much. But when it comes to loosening gun laws, that happens quickly. Tightening them could take years. But they've snapped into action with a new bill that reduces the amount of training required for teachers and other school staff who want to carry handguns on school grounds. House Bill 99 was reportedly rushed through both the state House and Senate in a single day. Governor Mike DeWine, a Republican, has already announced that he plans to sign it into law. Barring an unexpected development, this means that the school staff will no longer have to go through the 737 hours of training required under current law to wield deadly weapons on campus. The new minimum amount of training outlined by the bill is 24 hours. That's a lot less. More than 700 hours less. Under the tortured logic of the new Ohio legislation, armed school staff with only 24 hours of training will now be expected to do what Uvalde law enforcement could not: incapacitate or possibly kill a would-be mass shooter before a multitude of lives are lost. Such a policy could also make it more likely that a school employee will shoot someone who isn't a deadly threat. That's true generally. It should be pointed out that it also increases the possibility that it will all happen accidentally as well. And I know we all fight about the terminology. I still see people argue with me about the terminology. Don't say it's accidental. It's negligent at best. But accidental, I don't know. It forgives them the agency in this thing, and they make the choice, and choosing to be armed is up to you, and choosing to be negligent is up to you. All of which is true, and I don't argue with that. But, I also think that, it just doesn't, my feeling has always been that it just doesn't register with people. It doesn't work with anybody who might possibly be persuadable, but who at the moment comes down on the side of adding the gun to the situation because they just tell themselves, well, I won't be negligent. Like, I have control over that. Well, that's the point. You really don't. And you have control over whether or not you're going to be negligent in the sense that if you just plan and follow the cardinal rules of gun safety, you might be able to get away with you'll at least minimize the likelihood of an accidental discharge or negligent discharge, however you want to put it. But they still do happen, and they happen in the funniest ways in terms of people having the best intentions but not having it work out. And really, I use this as a launching pad to remind people, or introduce them sometimes for the first time, to the gun fail concept, to let them know, yeah, it's when the guns are waiting around to be used by a hero that we have the most accidents. No one ever thinks about the gun. They just sort of think of the gun as frozen in time in between the decision to carry it and the point at which you have to decide whether or not to use it. And in between, it's just idle, an inanimate object, which won't hurt anyone, except, of course, we know that it frequently ends up being the case. And I think accidental reminds people to some extent, or has the potential of reminding people that, yeah, it can happen to you even if you think you're being vigilant. And by the way, let me show you that you're not actually being vigilant. This is another of the main purposes of the gun fail collections. But let me read through the Ohio story for just a second. Republicans claim that they're streamlining redundancies in the current training program. 700 hours worth of redundancies. But many Ohio teachers seem unwilling to shoulder the grave new responsibility that the state legislature has thrust upon them. And it isn't mandatory, I'm sure. Although, I'm not positive. They are crazy sometimes. But, in the normal course of things, they say, well, if you want to participate in such a program, you can. They don't insist that all teachers be armed. I don't think. Anyway, many Ohio teachers unwilling to do this. Teachers' unions reportedly lined up against the measure, with representatives from the Ohio Federation of Teachers testifying in opposition. Mike Weinman, a representative from the Ohio Fraternal Order of Police, also spoke in opposition, contrasting the proposed 24 hours of training for teachers with the 60 hours of firearms training required for Ohio police officers. That's not really enough either. Our communities expect officers to be highly trained in the use of force and de-escalation. Even worse. We should expect the same from armed school staff members, he said. That's true, though. Good point. Except, well, I would like better, to be honest. The Ohio bill continues a long-running pattern in which GOP-dominated state legislatures react to mass shootings by making guns easier to obtain. According to the Texas Tribune, Texas politicians have consistently responded to previous massacres by greenlighting bills that increase the presence of firearms. After the racist mass shooting in El Paso in 2019, for example, the Texas state legislature passed a bill allowing Texans to open carry handguns without a permit. So, not a great record, really. But Ohio making this change. I'm reminded of a number of gun fail related stories, and I think I put together a tweet thread, yes, about that over the weekend that explains it. And reminding everybody, you wouldn't believe, unless you listen to the show or read Gun Fail, you wouldn't believe how often people accidentally shoot themselves or others when things like their keys get tangled up in their gun trigger, or while they're digging around in their wallets, or for loose change in their pockets, or their jacket zipper snags on their holster and gets into the trigger guard. Unless, of course, you wouldn't believe it how often it happens unless you saw links to how often it happens, like we do in Gun Fail. That's the reason that we link to all those stories. Although, over the years, many of them have disappeared from the news websites that originally hosted them. This is, though, as I always say, the go-to story on the subject, probably because of the blew up a toilet angle, you know what I'm talking about. But there are plenty more where this came from. And referring back to my September 11th, 2014 tweet about the Utah teacher who shot herself in the leg at her elementary school, having fired her weapon accidentally in the bathroom, shattering the toilet and sending toilet shrapnel into her leg. And I said, this happens all the time. I look for the article and I always have trouble finding it. But now I'll be able to find it again because I included it in the tweet thread. But I used to have the article more closely at hand because it was very important. And now I have the article, so that's good news, and I can share it with you. But whenever you pass one of these laws like they have just done in Ohio, where at least there they were just, it wasn't brand new. They were just lowering the required number of hours. But a lot of states are doing this, and of course Utah obviously has this law. But every time they pass one of these things, obviously there's some backlash. There's nervous parents who say, I'm not so keen on so many guns just floating around near my kids, and it worries me a little bit. They usually placate parents' fears if they're placable at all. But, when you're dealing with a relatively pro-gun crowd, like might be the case in Utah, and I guess at least in some places in Ohio, though Ohio's a bit of a gun fail capital. Anyway, they love to placate the parents by saying, well, we're going to have strict safety protocols. Yes, there will be armed teachers, but first of all, the teachers have to keep their guns concealed at all times. It does not do anybody any good for the guns to be out there in the open because, I don't know, sometimes they say things like, well, if somebody breaks in and they know who's armed, they'll go and they'll shoot them first. Okay, yeah, maybe not. I don't know how plausible it is for people to know which teachers are armed, but a very heavily planned attack might have that information. But even the planned attacks that we've seen to date don't appear to have that much information. But anyway, the gun has to stay on the teacher's person at all times. No leaving it in the purse. No letting it get out of your control. No showing it. Don't show it to the kids. Don't let the kids know you have it. but varying levels of strictness for that. But it doesn't matter because it's all a lie. That's the point. The article that I was looking for, and I eventually did track down, mentions that in Utah, where this teacher accidentally shot the toilet and herself, that they had such restrictions, that the rule was you can never, ever, ever show or let the students see that you have a gun. As a matter of fact, they go so far as to say, one of the parents quoted in the article that I have goes so far as to say that I guess they were assured that the policy is, well, you keep the guns concealed for all sorts of strategic reasons. But they were so serious about their don't show your gun that one of the parents summarized the rule as, if our security guards see your gun, or if anyone sees your gun, our security guards will shoot you. Anybody who flashes a gun in the building is subject to being shot by the security guards, because we'll assume that they're a school shooter. So super safe and responsible teachers, well, they won't have that happen because they'll be super safe and responsible and just not show the gun. But what if they show it by accident? Well, okay, first of all, obviously, no, they're not going to shoot a teacher who momentarily, accidentally flashes a gun, because that would be overdoing it. But then don't try to sell the policy that way, for one thing. But for another, I guess you got to realize, okay, but if you're already admitting that certain mistakes will happen as a matter of course, why aren't you talking about the other mistakes that I would argue do in fact happen as a matter of course? Not nearly as often as a sweater rides up and reveals the presence of a pistol in a hip holster. No, but pretty frequently. So if you're talking about mistakes being made in the gun handling, then you're talking about the possibility for mistakes that lead to accidental/negligent discharges as well, and you should take it seriously. But of course, no one did. The teacher very frequently accidentally revealed to the students in the class that she had the gun. And there's where is it? I think I put the article, I attached the article to the tweet where I said, oh, I can't find the article anymore. But then I did find it. It was from the Salt Lake Tribune. It's in their archives. And it's from back in 2014, right after this incident. September 13th in the Salt Lake Tribune. Parents split about teachers carrying guns in school. Lots of different opinions about it. But let's see if I can scroll down. By the way, the teacher's name, remember her, Michelle Ferguson Montgomery, in case she ever is the Republican nominee for president. Granite School District policy, that's where we were here, Granite School District, requires concealed weapon holders to have their guns on their person and, quote, in their control at all times. Then, let's see, down here, there is 6th grader Derek Atkinson is in Ferguson Montgomery's class and said he knew she carried a gun because he saw it on her hip when she bent over in the classroom. The teacher's nickname is Iron Woman. Okay. Well, just it's just the point is they don't care about enforcing the rule. Where is this other one about or was it in this, or was it in Newsweek that they said that the policy was that they would shoot you? I think it might have been in the Newsweek article that accompanied things. That's also in the thread. But let me pick up the thread again. I had said I can't find the article any longer, but now I found it. But it's very important to understand that Utah sold this law, like Ohio did, I'm sure, on the basis of strict rules about safety practices. But the kids in class say this teacher violated those rules all the time. Nothing happened until it happened. She shot herself. They let her violate this rule every time, even though a violation of the rule was as clear an indication as you could possibly ask for about whether or not there was a likelihood of accident. We ask you to follow these safety protocols, please, at all times. Nope. Well, who's going to have a gun accident in the school? If anybody's going to have a gun accident in the school, who's the most likely? Well, could happen to anyone. You can't predict these things, whatever. Da, 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 da. But if I had to nail it down and predict one name, I guess I would say, tell me who violates the safety protocols most often, and that's your best bet. And poof, it was true. Or boom, bang, it was true. I just felt like that ought to be pointed out. Now, more states will do the same thing that Ohio did. But people should realize that actually enforcing the safety rules that they sell you this bill with, Ohio, well, 24 hours of training for one thing, yeah. And teachers won't be allowed to tell the kids that, and they have to conceal the gun, and they have to keep it on their person at all times. Okay, but what if they don't, right? Actually ask yourself, what if they don't? Clearly, they're not going to shoot you, but here's the thing. People should realize that actually enforcing the safety rules means what? It means threatening these teachers who've volunteered to carry guns in the classroom, to take all this training, threatening these teachers with the very thing that gun enthusiasts like them say cannot be threatened. And it's not the shooting them part. You're not supposed to threaten that either, but apparently sometimes that happens, even if it's just a rhetorical device. But they threaten them with what? Disarmament. If you break all these rules, which are designed for safety and tactical advantage, if you want to be really cool about things, if you break all these rules, well, then we have no choice but to disqualify you from the program and tell you you can't carry your gun in class. But the whole point of this thing is that it was passed by people who said, it adds safety. I want kids to be in a classroom with an armed teacher. That's the safest they could possibly be. And are you going to be the public official that says, all right, the kids in this class are no longer allowed to be safe, quote unquote safe, because this teacher made this mistake? Come on, it won't happen again. I'll wear longer sweaters, whatever. Of course, that'll get caught up in there when you're trying to draw the gun fast enough to protect the kids. There's no winning with this thing. But there's also no losing for teachers who want to carry the guns. Doesn't matter how many rules you break until you shoot yourself. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Just a quick 1-minute break. So look, anyway, I just wanted to alert you to the fact, and you can talk to people. If you don't live in a state that's, or you think you live in a state that's not crazy enough to pass a law like this, well, congratulations. And you can spend your time talking to friends and family who do live in states crazy enough to pass laws like this and make people aware of it. I don't know how else to make the argument. I don't think a whole lot of people who are inclined to think that guns belong in classrooms are likely to believe this argument. But all you can do is document the atrocities and point them to it, and then have them say, well, you're going to call me a hypocrite for ignoring it, but don't worry about it. That's okay. That's part of the game. I'll let it roll off my back. And when I win, I'll be satisfied. You know, the old playbook. But this is what's going on. They will assure you that they have the strictest possible protocols in place. And you need to ask them, well, what happens if this protocol is violated? And, of course, it would be interesting in a public meeting, because then they may say, well, the teacher's disqualified. They can't carry a gun. Yeah, but do you really mean that? I know that's what you say the penalty is. But if you're going to pass this law because you believe school kids are safer when there's a gun in the classroom, are you really going to – can I count on you to vote to revoke this teacher's right to carry when there are safety violations, even though you just said that the kids are going to be safer? So, obviously the only conclusion is that the kids will now be less safe because the gun will be gone. Even though, you could argue, if you were trying to be consistent, you could say, well, kids are safer when there's a gun in the room and the teacher follows all the protocols. If the teacher isn't following the safety protocols, then nobody's safe around this teacher because there's a gun floating around. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm talking about. But, there's no reason, as they would say, to punish the law-abiding teachers just because of some bad apple who can't keep the sweater over the, all right, well, whatever. But you'll find that the same problem plagues everyone, and that the presence of the gun is revealed to almost everyone. You're going to end up disarming the whole school over again if your standards are real. So just admit that they're not real. Just admit that you don't have safety standards and try and pass the bill that way. We're going to put the guns in the teachers' hands with no safety standards whatsoever. We're going to say we have safety standards, but we're not going to enforce them. Is everybody okay with that? The answer, well, who knows? In some states, they'll say, yeah, there shouldn't even be safety standards. This 24 hours is too much. Anyway, it also sets up a very interesting other political conundrum, which, again, if it wasn't for the Gimmitarian playbook, could be a problem. So here's the thing that's got me thinking now. As more states pass these things and you realize the only punishment for violating the safety protocols is disarmament, and they're not going to do that. There will never be effective enforcement of these alleged safety rules. Now you run up into this situation. I'm curious about what conservatives and the Chris Rufo types are going to make of this. You got a immovable object, irresistible force problem setting up. Arm the teachers, conservatives, and gun freedoms people. These policies are going to run headlong and smash into the parents' rights policies, though Gimmitarians, again, don't care. I grab here, I think, from the Salt Lake Tribune article that I was citing before. We have, this one was from the Newsweek article about the teacher that shot herself in the toilet, and I'll put those things side by side. You got this clip. What's more, parents, by law in Utah for this thing, are not allowed to ask if their child's teacher is carrying a gun in the classroom. Right? The teachers are supposed to conceal it at all times, and for tactical reasons plus safety, you're not allowed to reveal whether you do or don't have a gun. So parents, by law in Utah, not allowed to ask if their child's teacher is carrying a gun in the classroom. This would violate the intent and the strategic advantage of the concealed weapon. If a permit holder had disclosed to faculty or staff that they were carrying a weapon, this could make them a target in an active shooter situation. Ben Horsley, communications director at the Granite School District, that includes Westbrook Elementary, where this teacher shot the toilet, said in a statement, a 2013 poll, and remember this is a 2014 article, 2013 poll showed a majority of Utah residents support the idea of arming teachers in public schools, but 82% of respondents thought that parents should have the right to know if their child's teacher is packing heat. How interesting is that? So where do we come down for the Chris Rufo types versus the other conservative types? What takes precedence? The right to bring your gun with you to school and protect the children and carry in the classroom? The constitutional right, God-given right, some people would say, to carry your gun in the classroom versus the parents' right to know. Didn't we just find out, weren't we just told in Virginia, and that it's going to work in every other state, the very key to survival of the Republicans, the way they're going to turn everything around, the way they're going to take back the majority in the House and the Senate and win back the White House, and they're winning governor's mansions and state legislatures all over the country on parents' rights. Just listen to parents. Parents have a right to have a voice, and parents have a right to know what the teachers are doing. We want to see their curriculum. We think they should be wearing body cameras. We think that we should be able to sue them if they teach the wrong thing about history. Everything is about empowering parents. The Utah law, which is almost certainly going to end up being the model for others. I don't know how Ohio did it. Maybe we could read their bill some point offline and figure out what it says about parents. But how do you square that with, well, okay, parents, there is one thing you're not allowed to know and not even allowed to ask. And it's about the guns. So if you wondered, wow, those are two pretty strongly held Republican core values. Which one will it be? And they've already asked the question. I mean, we know they've been asking the question for years. We've been forcing them to ask the question. Well, what's more important, children and their lives or your guns? Well, obviously they always opt for the guns. Well, what's more important here? Parents' rights, the core of what's at the core of Republican public policy making and political campaign strategizing nationwide. Parents' rights and parents' rights to know what's going on in the classroom / control what's going on in the classroom, or the almighty gun, God-given by right. And the answer is the gun. The gun. The only acceptable limitation on the parents' right to know is gun stuff. Gun rights. So, okay, along the way, I did set up this one tweet so people could jump into the thread here and just share it. The promise of strict safety regulations on armed teachers versus the reality. There's the Newsweek part here. That was the Newsweek article that I was just citing. Has, according to Walkinshaw, one of the parents in the school district, teachers with guns are not uncommon in Utah, and certain school districts implement policies that place certain restrictions on the teachers without violating state law. In one high school, for example, the teachers must have their weapon truly concealed at all times. Walkinshaw describes the policy as, if your gun is showing, our security guards will shoot you. I don't think anybody could accept that at face value. And then, of course, there was the story of Derek Atkinson, 6th grader back in 2014, who said that his teacher, Ms. Ferguson Montgomery, was always slipping out. He knew she carried a gun because he saw it on her hip when she bent over in the classroom. So there you have it. And the reality versus the promise of these safety regulations. From if your gun is showing, our security guards will shoot you, to do whatever until you actually shoot yourself. That's when she got in trouble. That's when she got fired. And that's the reality. Do not waste a single second of your time, if you're in one of these states, thinking that the safety regulations that come with the laws will ever be enforced. They will not. It is not happening. Stop talking about it. So there you go. I thought that was of some interest to share with some of you. I don't know. I hope you'll carry it forward in your daily lives. But yeah, that ain't happening. And they're never going to disarm any of these teachers. Speaking of teachers, maybe I'll transition over to this. I think Kate Sherrill shared this last night, and for inclusion, well, whenever. But I'll get to this in a second. Then I'll get to some comments that have just come in. But interesting, since we were on the subject of teachers, from chalkbeat.org, which I guess is about education and educational issues. The pandemic's toll. Does anybody remember the pandemic? We're still having one. The pandemic's toll. Study documents fatality rates of teachers and childcare workers in 2020. It's about time we started to get some definitive numbers about this. Matt Barnum put this report together just today or yesterday for Chalkbeat. Let's see if we can take a quick look and find some numbers. Childcare workers were, of course, more likely than a typical American worker to die of COVID in 2020, according to new research. I say, of course, but you had to do some research. Among over 1 million childcare workers, 405 died from COVID in 2020, the study found, using data from nearly every state. That translates to 38 deaths for every 100,000 childcare workers, a rate higher than workers overall, and one similar to others in essential, quote-unquote, essential industries where in-person work was common. 38 per 100,000. Very often I deal with those numbers normalized to per million, so that would be 380 deaths per million, in case you were looking for a parallel to like the way we measure the state numbers each night. Pre-kindergarten through 12th grade teachers, on the other hand, had somewhat lower mortality rates than the typical worker. Oh, that's interesting. Pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. So I guess the really young kids, the ones where, well, for one thing, no immunization possible and masking was an impossibility. Very interesting that they had, I guess they must have had it worse, but pre-K through 12th grade teachers had somewhat lower mortality rates than the typical worker. 808 teachers at public and private schools. I mean, gosh, that's still a lot. But out of many, many more, of course, it's a small percentage. But 800 teachers died from COVID during the first year of the pandemic, a rate of 15 deaths for every 100,000 teachers. The study, which examined the death rates among 155 million working Americans across 46 states, offers the clearest picture to date of the toll of that first year of the pandemic took on the American educators and the disproportionate impact on child care workers in particular. There's no way to know from this particular research whether or not it's the child care work itself that caused the increased morbidity. If it doesn't change the fact, though, that this is a workforce that we don't adequately support. The study can't distinguish among several reasons why the death rates of different occupations diverged. Although the researchers adjusted for age, they did not account for other factors that might affect someone's risk of contracting and dying from COVID, including other health conditions, access to health care, race, income, or geography. It also can't show whether COVID was contracted on the job or elsewhere. That's certainly true. But given how low paying very often these jobs in pre-K childcare can be, there's a little bit of self-selection for things like health conditions, access to health care, race, income, geography, etc. Jobs with the highest mortality rates included cooks, security guards, nursing aides, and truck drivers. And yet, who's out there protesting all of the restrictions? Truck drivers, or at least some of them anyway. The normal ones are busy working and thinking, I'm lucky to be alive. Workers in essential industries had nearly twice the death rate as those with non-essential positions. Overall, 31 workers in every 100,000 died of COVID in 2020. Although they can't show it definitively, the researchers suggest that the generally high death rates among essential workers were due to insufficient workplace safety precautions. What a thing to bring up at the time when we're discussing insufficient workplace safety precautions for armed teachers. Anyway, I think you get the idea. I encourage you to read through the article and get all the fine points and nuance. But we'll move on from here and collect a couple of comments that came in the last segment. Let's see. Ballerina X from Utah letting us know that Utah's guns in school / armed teachers laws are getting a deep dive. Oh, Ballerina X is telling everyone else that we're doing this. I thought this was, okay, here's what we should be doing. Oh, someone's doing a deep dive into the... Oh, it's me. Oh, how boring. I already know I'm doing this. Okay, but thank you for telling everybody. I appreciate that. Letting them know we're getting a deep dive on the KITM podcast today. Of note, the parents' rights thing, right? Parents in Utah can't ask if their teachers are armed by law. I think that's very interesting. I don't know if it's necessarily still the case, but I've never seen anybody repeal that. But I don't pay that close attention to Utah politics, and it hasn't been that many years, 2014 to 2022, 8 years. I bet they left that on the book. Let's see, what else we got here? Oh, Ricky commenting from PEI, sue teachers for not teaching the right history. Scopes monkey trial, anyone? Like they say, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And guess what? We're doomed to repeat it. But sometimes we just repeat history because it's so much fun and it's such great history. Let's try it again and see if we do better next time. All right, let's see. Oh, yeah, right. I also put aside the, speaking of the armed teachers thing, I did offer this up, and the tweet is out there. You can share it as well. Speaking to the journalists out there, do you need a hot take angle for your arm the teachers piece, right? If you're looking for something slightly different, I say, yeah, definitely cast it in light of the parents' rights things. Which side will Chris Rufo come down on? The right not to have to disclose that you're carrying a gun, or the right of the parents to know what's going on in their child's classroom? That's the question, and I put the Newsweek screen grab in there too. If you have the right to know everything that's going on in that classroom, but then again, precious God-given gun rights. Wow. Chris Rufo, I challenge you to figure this one out. And I mean, obviously you just say, I don't care. I'll just be a hypocrite. It doesn't matter, and it's in the playbook, and I can live with it, and that's fine. But it would be interesting to see whether, if they actually hash this out, Chris Rufo falls from grace by taking on the gun side of the Republican Party and falls from grace, or whether it's possible for the new parents' rights movements to be leveraged into fighting back against the gun rights movement. I wonder. This is the sort of fracture point that the Russian trolls were once thought to be quite adept at exploiting. We should give it a try. All right, let's try this. We'll fall into total silence and wait for Joan to show up. No, just kidding. We've got a couple minutes to fill here. I have a thread here that every once in a while I'll share a thread with you that goes beyond my own comfort zone and isn't, I would say, what I would call sufficiently backed up with links to credible published facts, etc., but which I think provides some interesting connective tissue or some good speculation, and it's always irresponsible not to let people speculate about these things. And I think it might even help in advance of Thursday's hearing, give us some framework from which to understand the breadth of what we were up against in January 6th and the time surrounding. It is offered up by the Twitter handle of, well, the person who's going by the Twitter address you can find as gal_suburban. I don't know, that's suburban gal backwards, basically, but gal, G-A-L _suburban, who adopts the Twitter handle of, well, mind F word, or I got my bleep here, mind, you get the, but all that's really here is mind F, and then the U is missing, but then there's a copyright, like a C in the circle, copyright K. MINDFCK. There's no U in it, so it's okay. But you get what she's getting at here. And let me just run through some of what's getting laid out here. The insurrection, this says, was Plan B. And I'm jumping in the middle. I guess this is a series of podcasts, perhaps. This one says, Insurrection was Plan B, Part 4. The coup at the Pentagon. But this starts to lay out, I don't know where Part 1 through 3 are. I guess if you look at Gal Suburban's Twitter timeline, you'll be able to find them. But I don't know how far back you got to go to try and find the others. But let me share Part 4 with you, and you can see whether you want to spend your time looking for parts 1 through 3 and then finding out parts of what? Podcast? Substack? I don't know. Anyway, this was kind of interesting. And Gal Suburban credits this to Jim Stewartson and me. Not me, but her. And let's see. Is like her name on it somewhere so I can stop calling her Gal Suburban? Well, anyway. It's all at Jim Stewartson's Substack. If you want to find it, it does say in the next tweet here, this is a multi-part series on a secret plan to execute a bloodless coup against the U.S. government using the government itself. I mean, that's not startling or shocking to any of us. We know the story, but I want to see how they cast it here. This work is based on the research of Gal Suburban and Associates, and includes the Twitter handles of several of them. And I don't know if I know any of them, but there's quite a few. And we'll read their speculation. And written with Jim Stewartson, who writes with a Substack here. There's a link to Part 4 anyway, so we can look into that, and maybe there'll be some links to Parts 1 through 3. But I skimmed through this, and I found it interesting. Immediately after losing the 2020 election, Trump decapitated the civilian leadership structure at the Department of Defense and installed a group of corrupt, unqualified, anti-democratic operatives that would take the necessary steps to effectuate a coup before Biden could be sworn in. Nothing overly shocking here, and we've heard the stories and the characterization of these people as certainly sympathetic to Trump and probably in place to help facilitate a coup. Christopher Miller, acting Secretary of Defense, was, of course, the most well-known of the bunch, and the one about whom we might have had the most questions. Kash Patel, we've heard his name over and over again. He, too, was installed late in the Trump administration over at the Pentagon over many objections. Anthony Tata, I don't know, T-A-T-A, who's in the role of, I got to get in close to see this one. Performing, oh wow, look at this. This is some designation. This is beyond acting here. Performing duties of Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. Sorry about the microphone. I had to lean way in close to the screen just to see who this person was. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more. And then, of course, Ezra Cohen Watnick, whose name comes up all the time, acting Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. And these are people whose names have come up a lot, but specifically that they all came together in the Pentagon toward the very end of the Trump administration was worrisome for a lot of people. So this is I guess a tale about what they were allegedly supposed to do to facilitate the coup, as hashed out by this person, Mind F, and Jim Stewartson. I don't know who they are, but you know what? I kind of like the story. Plan A, to overturn the will of the American people and keep Trump in power, was, in case you were wondering, since the insurrection was Plan B, what was Plan A? To use Executive Order 13848 regarding foreign interference as a pretext to take over vote counting in swing states and flip the race to Trump. This is what, of course, Mike Flynn and Sidney Powell wanted very badly to do. And Giuliani was interested in seizing voting machines as well. Like all dictators, Trump knew he needed his own executioners. And here again, over a lineup of the same folks, Chris Miller, Kash Patel, Anthony Tata, whatever his name is, and Ezra Cohen Watnick. As discussed in part 1, 2, and 3 of this series, Plan A to overturn the will of the American people and keep Donald Trump in power was the executive order. Fast forward, what is this? Fast forward, this is one of Mind F, or Gal Suburban's own tweets embedded in the screenshot here. Fast forward to the pre- and post-election disinformation campaign. November 13th, 2020, Health Ranger, that's what it says. 2018 executive order, that was the number we called out before, 13848 from 2018, gives the DOJ Criminal Division the power to seize all assets of individuals and companies that were complicit in aiding or covering up foreign interference in elections. And then another of her own tweets. Once all the evidence is compiled and presented, President Trump merely needs to declare the entire election to be null and void as an artifact of a failed foreign coup attempt. That's their estimation of the first plan that I guess never came to fruition. But what an interesting thought that was. That they were first going to say foreign election interference did happen and it skewed the results of the election, and we declare it to be a national security emergency. We're going to seize all the voting equipment and try and come up with some evidence. But in the meantime, I'm staying here. We're going to lock it down. I'll stay president until we know what the hell's going on around here. And I guess that was just too audacious. So they said, let's storm the Capitol and smash the windows in and hang Mike Pence instead. I mean, let's ratchet things down a little bit, shall we? Anyway, the idea was to use the military and USAID, really, to administer these fraudulent recounts under the administration of Mike Flynn, who touts his experience taking over other countries and running overseas elections. That, according to a linked article from Mother Jones here, just thought I would take a look. Draft order would have given armed Trump supporters the power to seize voting data. Dan Friedman article from just a couple days ago, June 4th. An associate of Mike Lindell circulated the proposal, which would have granted extraordinary powers to allies of Mike Flynn. And as you know, Mike Flynn is a spy. So it seems like an extraordinarily bad idea. But what an interesting possibility. We're not going to have time to run through the bulk of the thread here, but I just liked the idea of bringing up the possibility that the insurrection wasn't, in fact, their first plan. Plan A failed to materialize because the DNI report on foreign interference did not support the invocation of the executive order. The newly installed leadership of the Pentagon sent out to ensure that Plan B, a physical insurrection of the Capitol, would succeed. And maybe that's why no one showed up to help.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen versus Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I guess as we bide our time here, I will continue with this. I'm going to switch over to the actual Substack compilation of this tweet thread. We left off by noting that when Plan A failed to materialize because the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, the DNI report on foreign interference didn't support the invocation of this executive order. They didn't have any evidence of, or hadn't manufactured any evidence anyway, of what they thought would justify seizing all the voting machines. So they go with the physical insurrection on the Capitol instead. Then goes on to explain this memorandum for the Secretary of the Army, which appears below, ensuring that the National Guard would not be able to adequately respond to violence on January 6th is a smoking gun, proving that the Secretary of Defense knew exactly what was going to happen and wanted it to succeed. I don't know whether we would necessarily reach the same conclusion, but this document, it is purported, specifically prevents the National Guard from doing what the Guard are there for, which is to respond to incidents on American soil that require military-level force or operational capability, and puts it under the thumb of Christopher Miller, acting Secretary of Defense, who was installed after Trump lost the election, despite Miller having no qualifications for the job. Here's the memo. I think you've probably seen it before. It's been entered into evidence at the January 6th committee as well, but really hampers readiness for the National Guard for no particular reason, none given anyway. Miller's memorandum worked in tandem with this presidential memorandum published the next day that was about, quote, Antifa being involved in, quote, organized criminal activity. It was part of Plan B that violent leftists would show up to the January 6th insurrection so they could then blame Antifa and institute martial law. That's the guess. Embedded here is one of the Mind F tweets here. The day before the Capitol insurrection, Trump wrote a presidential memorandum likely in anticipation of plans for the 6th, where his militias expected counter-demonstrations, which would have justified the declaration of martial law, in his mind, in Trump's mind, anyway. And included are the presidential memorandum. Well, let's see. They're actually at the Trump White House Archives memorandum on inadmissibility of persons affiliated with Antifa based on organized criminal activity. January 5th. Sure enough, if I'm looking at a real thing here, the Trump White House Archives.gov, by the authority vested in me as president and by the Constitution, all the things that he thinks he has the power to do. And just doing that, I guess targeting Antifa for arrest if they show up. How interesting that they were so sure that they would, or that they could fake that they might do that. Note that the authors of this piece and many others anticipated this plan ahead of time and actively warned the left about it. The lack of participation by anyone in the anti-fascist movement on January 6th thwarted this part of the plan. As we know, they didn't show up, certainly not in any numbers, no reports whatsoever of their actual presence at the Capitol or anywhere in Washington. As by way of proof here, the embedded tweet of Jim Stewartson himself, who says here, listen here, please, dated December 31st, 2020. If you are Antifa, anti-fascist, or really just hate Nazis and want to punch them in the face, do not under any circumstances go to D.C. on 1/6. If you do, they will use you to create more fascism. They want you there. You are the plan. Do not engage. And I don't know whether there was anybody with plans to go who was dissuaded by this, or whether just lucked out. But anyway, it turns out to have been a very good thing that there not be counter-demonstrators there. Back to the Substack here. Parts of the military command cooperated with civilian leadership. On January 3rd, 2021, 3 days before the insurrection, this extraordinary piece was published in the Washington Post. It should be seen as a major red flag when Dick Cheney, William Cohen, Leon Panetta, and 7 other living secretaries of defense agree on anything, much less a joint hair-on-fire warning about using the military in election disputes. All 10 living former defense secretaries get together in this Washington Post opinion piece. All 10 living former defense secretaries say involving the military in election disputes would cross into dangerous territory. Authored by Ashton Carter, Dick Cheney, Bill Cohen, Mark Esper, Robert Gates, Chuck Hagel, Jim Mattis, Leon Panetta, Bill Perry, and Donald Rumsfeld. Wow, all together. At a minimum, these men were aware of the serious imminent plan to attempt to use the military to interfere with elections. But more than that, they seem to be intentionally drawing attention to acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller and making clear to him and anyone in the chain of command that they were watching. Despite this, the memo to stand down the National Guard to facilitate the breaching of the Capitol building to interfere with the peaceful transition of power came the day after 10 living defense secretaries wrote a letter warning Miller that he and his subordinates were each bound by oath, law, and precedent not to interfere in the elections. And here's the clip showing them doing that. 2 active members of the armed forces, Secretary of the Army General Ryan McCarthy and his deputy, General Charles Flynn, yes, Mike's brother, ran interference for Miller while the Capitol was being overrun and the mob was murdering cops. They successfully delayed the deployment of the National Guard until it was clear that the insurrection wasn't going to work. Then the Army lied about it. And this clip embedded here, Army falsely denied that Flynn's brother was involved in a key part of the military response to the Capitol riot. Oh, the Army denies that Flynn had anything to do with it. Turns out that was a false denial. Made worse, the DOD Inspector General came out with a report that was factually and substantively wrong. It came after the inauguration and pointed the finger at the head of the D.C. National Guard, William Walker, rather than at Charles Flynn, Ryan McCarthy, and Christopher Miller, where the blame belongs. Flynn was given his 4th star and his new assignment as Deputy Secretary of the Army on the same day that Mike Flynn got his, as they say, illegal pardon from Donald Trump. It was this position that gave Charles Flynn the authority to interfere on January 6th. It was a failure of our military leadership that the same Charles Flynn who lied to the DOD IG about the fact that he intentionally helped his brother Mike try to take over the U.S. government is still in charge of 90,000 American troops as commanding general of the U.S. Army Pacific. Well, what about the civilian leadership? By all appearances, Christopher Miller was a figurehead and a pasty white thin dude, but a patsy, same thing, for the brains behind it all, and that's enclosed in quotes, Mike Flynn allies Ezra Cohen, Watnick, and Kash Patel, who were given the positions of Undersecretary for Intelligence and Pentagon Chief of Staff, respectively. Ezra Cohen is a very well-trained and elusive operative who covers his tracks well, despite doing numerous missions for Mike Flynn aimed at dismantling democracy since 2016. Cohen, they allege here, trained in psyops and intelligence at The Farm with Mike Flynn's son, Matt. Cohen was in the Defense Intelligence Agency, which Mike Flynn led until he got fired by Barack Obama in 2014 because he's a spy. Like Flynn, Cohen was rejected by the CIA and therefore hated it. It should be noted that Trump's appointee, Scott Berrier, who was fingered by Ezra Cohen for executing an intelligence operation in a friendly nation to support the Italy-gate election conspiracy theory, is still currently head of the DIA. I should say that again. Trump's appointee, Scott Berrier, who Ezra Cohen Watnick says was responsible for executing an intelligence operation in a friendly nation to support the Italy-gate conspiracy theory, still head of the CIA. So I thought the most important, I guess if you want to use that term, person to try to float Italy-gate as a theory was Sidney Powell, who called Ezra Watnick at some point and said, you got to do something about this. The Italians are using their satellites and something. And he actually, I don't know whether, maybe he was the one that leaked this to the press, but he said, no, you're crazy, which is kind of weird. Now he says Scott Berrier also had something to do with this. And actually, you remember there was more to it. It was more than just that the Italians were using their military satellites, but they had kidnapped the director of the CIA, right? That was the claim, Gina Haspel, is that right? And that there needed to be a rescue mission. Remember this story? That Sidney Powell calls Ezra Cohen and says, you got to launch a rescue mission or give me a letter of marque and reprisal and I'll launch a rescue mission to rescue the CIA director. And the CIA director, of course, had not been kidnapped by anyone. Hadn't been kidnapped by anyone, not in Italy, not in Croatia, not in Pharaoh Islands. Just not true. But what's worse than all of this stupidity, I mean, Sidney Powell's a lunatic, but who cares? Another person who believed this is still currently head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Maybe we ought to defund that along with the cops, by the way, because it seems to produce some real lunatics. Mike Flynn and Scott Berrier both apparently, driven crazy by heading the DIA. All right. Here to an embedded tweet from Jim Stewartson. And again, I have to say, I'm not certain who these people are. I don't know who MindF is. I don't know who Jim Stewartson is. They're a little bit fringy for me, and they're out ahead of where I would be willing to be. And I don't know. They present a little bit kind of like, I don't know if it's fair to say Alex Jones of the left. I don't think so. Alex Jones is really far gone. But I say they present that way because they brand their material in ways that are reminiscent of Alex Jones. If only this. Alex Jones, of course, brands all of his materials as InfoWars, right? And it just so happens that Jim Stewartson here brands at least this piece that's embedded at this point in his Substack article as Mind War. Mind War, the psychological war on democracy. It's a little concerning, but it might just be a bad title. I don't know. But yeah, asking, why is the Italy-gate guy still running the DIA? Military intelligence provides information to the government about activities of enemy nation states. The DIA is the military equivalent of the CIA, It's the official organ for U.S. military intelligence. The DIA was run by Mike Flynn until he was fired by Barack Obama after the DIA completely failed to warn Obama about who knows what, but also the protocols of installing the live internet in his office, et cetera, et cetera. But good question, and we're offered the chance to read more here. But yeah, why is Scott Berrier still in charge of the DIA, though he apparently sent Americans into an Italian prison to support Donald Trump's big lie? Was it for a Haspel rescue? I'm curious about that. I don't think I ever heard about actually sending anybody to Italy. That seems unusual. I would check into that. Perhaps we'll have time. Let's run down more of this Substack here, though. Ezra Cohen, of course, was installed at the National Security Council by Mike Flynn at the beginning of the Trump administration. When Flynn got caught lying to the FBI about his communications with the Russian government, was fired a few weeks in, Flynn sent Cohen on a, quote, mission to find out who had been investigating him. Cohen obtained classified material through his access at the NSC and illegally passed this information to then Devin Nunes aide Kash Patel. This was all an effort to create a scandal out of the investigation into 2016 election interference rather than the interference itself. 4 years later, Patel was Cohen's partner at the Pentagon while they oversaw the near death of democracy. That's a good point. But just for reminder's sake, when they say it was all an effort to create a scandal out of the investigation into election interference, mind you that all culminated in the collapse of John Durham's case just the other day. That they wanted to make the case about there being a hoax to start the investigation, and the hoax theory has fallen apart. But these guys were participating in trying to generate the evidence for it. Patel is a propagandist and an agent of an enemy foreign power, they conclude, who worked with Rudy Giuliani to try to influence Ukraine to generate fake oppo for Trump against the Bidens. Kash Patel, like Cohen and Nunes, knew all about QAnon and fed information to Flynn and quote-unquote Q, including the fact that Nunes was going to sue Twitter before Twitter knew about it. Patel's current activities include helping Nunes run failed Twitter clone Truth Social, which is recapitulating? Yeah, all right, that's what it says. QAnon. I don't think that's the word they wanted. Next up, the infiltration of the military. Donald Trump spent 4 years undermining American institutions. One of his primary targets was the military chain of command. He believed he could corrupt military leadership the same way he corrupted everyone around him. That's why he called them my generals, until he insulted and demeaned them when they failed to meet his whims. Despite this rejection by military leadership, the President of the United States attempted to use the DoD for a coup. A couple of embedded Mind F tweets in this. While it's true that the chain of command held and military force was not used to steal the election, it may have taken an extraordinary intervention by, let's say, every living Secretary of Defense to prevent it. In the 17 months since the insurrection, major efforts have been made to continue to infiltrate and radicalize the military. Let's see, and then one of the Mind F tweets here, it's how they've been able to recruit so many veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. It's the fear they've weaponized against regular Americans. They use radical Islamic terrorism. Ever notice when they discuss immigration, they're sure to include Middle Eastern countries? This, I guess, trying to raise eyebrows about their recruitment efforts among the military and recently retired military. Retired military officers, especially Army PSYOP personnel, they claim, play a major role in the creation and distribution of the propaganda and psychological operations currently endangering American democracy. Both active and retired military made up an oversized proportion of the January 6th insurrectionists, many of whom called themselves digital soldiers, a QAnon slogan coined and trademarked by retired Lieutenant General Michael T. Flynn in November of 2016, where he writes that he considers himself a digital soldier now. Next up, the thin green line. The United States military is the most powerful kinetic force on planet Earth, a deadly weapon capable of destroying anything in its path, or incinerating every one of us until it gets into lawless, unconstitutional hands. Corruption and radicalization of our military ranks from recruit to general officer represents one of the most dangerous objectives of our enemies. The freedom of Americans and the rest of the world rests on the shoulders of our service members, the vast majority of whom serve honorably. Extremists have long sought out American service members for their skill sets and training. At all levels of government, we must hold accountable those who seek to weaponize them for ideological or personal goals by strengthening the systems that support our men and women when they leave active service to prevent recruitment and radicalization by those who seek to harm democracy. American institutions must make certain our military remains true to its mission and oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. This means to adhere to constitutional purposes of our government, to establish justice, all that stuff, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense against our enemies. All right, well, very interesting. Parts 1, 2, and 3 are linked here. Part 1, the insurrection was Plan B. Part 2, the meeting. I don't know which meeting. And Part 3, Crusades, are CR, USAID, S. Like USAID is apparently a big part of this, but I don't know. That seems like a role that they wouldn't ordinarily be even in the neighborhood of being able to take on. How the government of the United States was weaponized by Christo-fascists and how much worse it might have been, another of their installations here. But USAID, not often the kind of organization you would think would be involved in this stuff. Are we interested in figuring out what their theory is about how USAID would have been used? Let's see. Let's see. I'm curious about what they might have to say about this. Nearly 1,000 years ago, it says, interesting, European Christians, including the Catholic Church, launched the Crusades, a multi-century genocidal holy war to retake the Holy Land from Islamic rule. Some of the militaristic orders of the Church that fought those battles are still in operation with the same mission, to eliminate Islam from the planet. Present-day crusades look different, however. The battle is primarily fought in the information space by lobbyists in Congress, institutes of mass destruction funded by dark money, social media psyops, and by attacking elections. But the goals of the modern-day crusades are similar, reclaiming an ideological dominion over the Holy Land and its people. Maybe. I don't know. That one seems a little further afield even than this one. So, I'll leave it to you to decide whether you want to try to digest the rest of these Substack articles. But I thought, at the very least, the names that were named were the right ones, that you might be hearing more about their activities in the upcoming hearings. Whether it's going to be this Thursday's hearing, I have doubts. But there's definitely a component of this plan that involves those names at the Pentagon. I mean, I think the strongest conclusion, the one that others have joined in reaching, certainly has been that Miller, Patel, Cohen, Watnick, and I guess Tata, whatever his last name is, and several others at the Pentagon and in the civilian leadership at the Pentagon were clearly interested in reining in the ability of the National Guard or regular troops to intervene on the side of restoring order, certainly. And well worth exploring, and we'll continue to do it. Anyway, I just wanted to give you that. Like I said, it's a little bit out there and presented in sensationalist style, but I thought it was worth spending a little pre-hearing time on that one. How about this? Let's end with this one. This was tweeted around the other day by somebody who said, some Twitter wag who said, this is a spicy meatball. Spencer Sue's piece from June 3rd in the Washington Post, ex-U.S. diplomat pleads guilty in Qatar lobbying plot, names general. Let's see what this might be about. Richard G. Olson admitted to misdemeanor ethics violations, but asks why retired four-star Marine General John G. Allen has not been charged. That's interesting, unusual finger-pointing for a high-ranking government official. But let's take a look at what this is. And, I mean, it sounds bad, like but then it turns out to be misdemeanor ethics violations. But still, whenever a Middle Eastern country is involved, questions get raised, particularly the fabulously wealthy Middle Eastern countries, I guess we should say. A former U.S. ambassador to Pakistan and the UAE pleaded guilty Friday to federal charges in connection with a secret lobbying campaign, more secrets, on behalf of Qatar to influence the Trump White House and Congress in 2017 after implicating a retired four-star American general in the effort. Richard G. Olson, a 34-year career Foreign Service officer who served as the Obama administration's special representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan from 2015 until 2016, admitted to lying in ethics paperwork and violating revolving door laws by lobbying for Qatar within a year of retiring from federal service. Okay. In pre-plea proceedings in federal court in Washington, Olson's defense counsel said he admitted to the misdemeanor charges, each punishable by up to 1 year in prison at his sentencing on September 13th, and cooperated with federal prosecutors on the understanding that they were also investigating and pursuing criminal charges against retired four-star Marine General John G. Allen. The latter commanded U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan before retiring in 2013. He was tapped in late 2017 as president of Washington's influential Brookings Institution, to which Qatar agreed in 2013 to donate $14.8 million over 4 years. So they agreed in, when did they agree? In 2013. And over the course of 4 years, they would donate all this money. That would bring them to 2017. And then in 2017, they pick a new president, and it's this Marine general. And the question, I guess, is, did they steer him to the presidency from with that money? The two men are the latest high-level American officials to be enmeshed in a long-running federal investigation into a ferocious and lucrative battle for influence in Washington waged between the wealthy Persian Gulf nation of Qatar and its regional rival, the UAE, as Donald Trump prepared to take office and engage in new rounds of Middle East diplomacy. You may remember that UAE and Saudi Arabia ran a blockade of Qatar for some time. They were on the verge of open hostilities for a while. In July of 2021, billionaire Thomas J. Barrack Jr., Trump's longtime friend and presidential inaugural committee chairman, was criminally charged with obstructing justice and acting as an unregistered agent for the UAE, and American businessman Imad Zuberi, a major political donor to both political parties, was sentenced in February 2020 to 12 years in prison after pleading guilty to tax evasion, foreign influence peddling, and campaign finance violations. I don't think we ever heard his name, but it didn't stick with us if we did. Barrack, of course, we know. In plea papers, Olson acknowledged not disclosing, as required in annual ethics forms, that he had received a first-class airplane ticket from New Mexico to London and a stay in a luxury hotel in January of 2015 worth about $20,000 from a Pakistani-American businessman who was not identified by the government, but whose description matches that of Zuberi. Olson admitted meeting with a Bahrain businessman who would offer him a 1-year, $300,000 contract for work after he left the State Department. In June of 2017, Olson admitted in plea papers he contacted an unnamed third person, whom his defense identified as Allen, General Allen, to help provide aid and advice to Qatari government officials with the intent to influence U.S. policy during a blockade of Qatar by the UAE and its ally Saudi Arabia. Zuberi, Olson, and Person 3 traveled to Doha, where the latter pair met with various Qatari officials, including its emir, then returned to meet in Washington with members of Congress. In court filings and a hearing on May 27th, Olson attorney J. Michael Hannon pressed U.S. prosecutors to say why Allen had not been charged. It's a good question. It doesn't help get you out of trouble, though, so, I don't know, a little weird. Exculpatory evidence about Allen could mitigate Olson's sentence, or invalidate his plea agreement, Hannon argued, saying a decision not to charge the general could mean prosecutors improperly induced a guilty plea from the diplomat who relied on government representations that he might be recommended for leniency at sentencing for his cooperation. If, in fact, there is no case against General John Allen for allegedly violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act, we think that is a significant piece of information for sentencing, just as we believe that an inducement to enter into this plea agreement is important to the court, Hannon told U.S. Magistrate Judge G. Michael Harvey, who accepted Olson's plea. Very interesting. So, lots still to sort out from this one. I'm going to keep an eye on it. I scroll down a little bit, by the way, to find Elliot Broidy's name comes up in this one, too. So there's a lot of loose ends that perhaps we want to look at. And what can I tell you? We're out of time. But before Thursday, you may want to read up on this one. And I don't know. Well, Joan was busy again today. And, of course, last week having missed things, it's hard to get back onto a Tuesday schedule. There's lots of chaos going on in her new place. She's probably getting ready for these hearings and will probably be working double and triple overtime to keep you informed. I give her a pass as I do every time.
From networksradio.com.
We're lucky to have her when we get her.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
I know, and I shouldn't have said anything because now she'll be all embarrassed about this stuff, but it's okay. We had lots to talk about. We miss you very much, Joan. We'd love to have you back. If you want to make a good effort visit sometime in the middle of the week, always welcome. Call us, surprise us, delight us, if you will. Stay tuned now for the surprise and delight of the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Next.